How you doing, everybody? Welcome back to Before I Forget. Thanks for tuning in. Once again, this is a video channel I've created to help document all my experiences and my stories of my life in music, first as a fan, and then as someone that has worked in the business. And also inspired, this channel's been inspired by my Instagram channel, 1985 Road Dog. I started posting pictures there of my life in music over the last few years, and it's really gained some steam and people seem to like it. So I started doing these videos to document some of the stories that are paired with those photographs. I've got a book that I've written that's finished that I'm seeking publication for about my life in music, and various other writings that I've been working on for years. So I've got a lot of content, a lot of stories. This chapter is about a cover band on Long Island, New York, or in the Long Island area called Hotshot. 1983, we're talking, this is the time frame, 1983 into 84. And Hotshot featured future Danger Danger members Bruno Ravel and Steve West. Singer was Mike Pont. Guitar player was Joey Sykes, and keyboard player was Bobby Guy originally, then Gary Bavona. But let's just go backwards so I can bring you up to speed on what things were like at that time frame in the New York area. I had met Bruno through a high school friend. Friend of mine in high school, Scott Levitt, introduced me to Bruno Ravel, who lived in Queens. I lived in western Nassau County, Long Island. That area, if you're not familiar, you've got New York City, which encompasses Manhattan, Brooklyn, Queens, Staten Island, and the Bronx. And then to the east is Long Island, and there's two counties, Nassau, which is the one all the way west, and then Suffolk, which goes all the way out to the end of Long Island, where the Hamptons are, and Montauk Point and all that. Then to the south, you've got west and south, you've got New Jersey. To the north of Manhattan, you've got Westchester County, and you've got also Connecticut there. So it was very tight. You know, you're talking a 2-3 hour drive around this area. But I lived in western Nassau County, not too far from the Queens line. Bruno lived in Queens. So Scott introduced me to Bruno, and we just started hanging out because we liked a lot of the same music, and we all loved Kiss, and, the bands of the day that were like Kiss, Angel and Stars, and, we all loved Van Halen, of course. And we that was our shared passion, was those bands and music and concerts. We also liked to party. We like to go out to clubs and, drink and take Quaaludes and chase girls. I mean, that's what we did. You're talking right now, 1978, 79. That's when I met Bruno, in 78. And, we had a shared passion for music, and we hung out. We went to a lot of clubs. I was a DJ at the time. I had just, really gotten the ball rolling with being a nightclub DJ at the time. And I had made a lot of friends in the club business. And Bruno and I would always go to Xenon, which was a big, giant disco in Manhattan, 1979, 1980 in there. Very similar to Studio 54. It was an old theater. Basically, the story went, people that couldn't get into studio went to Xenon. But Bruno and I went to Xenon a lot, and we partied, and we went to see Twisted Sister all the time. I mean, Twisted Sister at the time was playing, 4 or 5 nights a week, playing cover songs in nightclubs. Again, 1983, the drinking age in New York State was still 18. And there was no photograph on a driver's license. There was no picture on a driver's license. So, I mean, people were out in bars at 16. 17 easy with a fake ID. So you had clubs that would pack in thousands of people. I mean, Twisted Sister at their peak, were a huge cover band, and they mixed in some of their own material as they, developed and got bigger, but they started as a cover band. And by the end of, 1981, 82, Twisted Sister was selling out 5,000 seats in clubs like Fountain Casino in New Jersey, or 3,000 people at Hammerheads in Long Island. No record deal. They were like a cover band doing some original songs too. So that scene was huge. Bruno and I started going to all these clubs in Manhattan. Manhattan was really the only place where there would be nightclubs and bars with original bands. Anywhere else, Long Island, Queens, New Jersey, Connecticut, Westchester County up north, all cover bands, a cover band scene where bands played other people's material. A lot of it was the top 40 of the day. At the time, there was a lot of top 40 new wave stuff going on, or you were a harder edged band and you played like Deep Purple and Judas Priest and Black Sabbath and the Scorpions, and there were bars and clubs for those kind of bands. But it was a huge cover band scene. But in Manhattan, that's where you went for original music. There was a club that Bruno and I and Scott Levitt and all of our friends went to called the Great Gildersleeves, which was on the Bowery, a couple blocks from CBGB. So in 1978-79, the scene of original music in New York was based off of punk and new wave and post-punk and stuff like that. You know, all those bands were kind of like popping out of CBGB. Blondie, the Ramones, Talking Heads. Great Gildersleeves was like a throwback rock kind of a bar, rock nightclub. They had a good-sized stage and a good PA. And the bands that played there were kind of like left over from the Dolls, from the New York Dolls. Kind of that scene were kind of left over. Bands that played Gildersleeves that we liked, there's a band called the Brats. You know, the Brats are famous from having been doing the very, very earliest gigs with Kiss when they would rent ballrooms and stuff. The Brats and Kiss would play a lot together. So the Brats were a big Gildersleeves band. There's a band called Wowie. There's a band called Lover. T-Roth, Another Pretty Face. Bonnie Parker Band. There was a lot of cool original bands, but they were all throwbacks. They weren't hip. It was like leftover rock stuff when everybody else in Manhattan, which is a super trendy Manhattan, is on the punk bandwagon or the post-punk bandwagon. So the bands we would go see were not cool. I mean, the people that went to see those bands, they came from the outer boroughs of Queens and Long Island and, you know, New Jersey and places. They, like Manhattan people really didn't go to Gildersleeves. But the bands were really good. I mean, they had good, catchy pop rock songs. The Brats had great songs. And there was another band that was a Gildersleeves band called Hotshot. We loved Hotshot. And Bruno and I and some of our other friends would go to Gildersleeves, Great Gildersleeves, all the time. And, you know, try to be cool and, you know, satin jackets and like, you know, flared pants and capizios on our feet. You know, we were trying to be hip and cool and happening and, you know, taking speed and drinking, you know, rum and cokes and just trying to fit in. And we went to Gildersleeves a lot. And then we also went out to the cover band scene and saw Twisted Sister and bands like, you know, Zebra. And, you know, Zebra got a deal with Atlantic Records down the line, but Zebra started out just playing Led Zeppelin covers. All those bands were playing covers first. There was a band called Swift Kick that we loved, featuring Tony Bruno, who went on to play in Soraya and figured into the Danger story down the line. So that was a scene we were kind of in. And then Bruno joined a local Queens cover band called Lipstick. You know, they had a girl drummer, which was unique at the time. And Lipstick played, they played The Boys Are Back in Town by Thin Lizzy. They played a lot of Joe Jackson. They played the song Rock and Roll by Velvet Underground. Stuff like that. And, you know, they played around here or there. Nothing very big or anything like that. In that cover band scene at the time, there were booking agents that booked cover bands into all the nightclubs. And I can't stress again, because the drinking age was 18, there were so many kids going out to bars and clubs. There were thousands of bars and clubs that booked these bands all around New York City. Not in Manhattan, but Long Island, Brooklyn, Queens, like I said, Westchester. So there were so many places to play, and there were booking agents that booked these cover bands. So you had to have your act together to be booked, you know. So Bruno's band Lipstick really weren't of that caliber yet. You know, they just they never got into that circuit. Um, and then again, we continued hanging out, me and Bruno, we became really, really tight, good friends. And then Bruno was in a band, a cover band called the Kids for a while. Actually, let me back up. There's a Bruno. Bruno met Steve West, the drummer in Danger Danger, at concerts and stuff. We started seeing each other at all the shows. We all loved Cheap Trick, so we kind of saw each other. And Steve saw Bruno around and thought he was cool. And at the time, we didn't know, but Steve West was jamming with a guitar player named Mitch Pfeffer, aka Mitch Diamond, who had a band called Diamond. Steve and Mitch were jamming, and I went to high school with Mitch, and it was just like we all were kind of floating around each other, and then it kind of solidified. Bruno and Steve joined up with Mitch and a singer named Bob Ring, and they formed this cover band Diamond. And they did Deep Purple and Judas Priest and that kind of stuff. Mitch, the guitar player, was a big Blackmore fan, Richie Blackmore. So they did a lot of Purple and Rainbow and stuff like that. And that went on for a while. The singer Bob Ring had a great voice, but he was a character and a half. And it was too crazy. It was the times, man. This is like 1981 right now, Diamond. And we're partying, all of us, man. It was a different time. Everybody was rolling, and it was just it was a snapshot in history that won't be repeated, that the early 80s, because of many reasons, which I'll get into. But anyway, so Bruno and Steve get into this band, the Kids, who were pretty popular. They auditioned for a bass player and a drummer. And Bruno and Steve went down and auditioned with the Kids and got into the Kids. And the Kids were in that circuit of having a booking agent, and they were playing a lot. So that was kind of like got them in that groove of being a professional, gigging all the time. And you made a living from playing music. The Kids, Kelly Nichols actually was auditioning for the Kids at the same time as a bass player. This is 1982 probably right now. They kind of like Steve West remembered Kelly from that audition, which I'll get into later on. Anyway, so the Kids go on, they're doing okay. That breaks up. And at some point, Bruno and Steve hooked up with these guys that had a band called JC. JC was breaking up. So Bruno and Steve joined up with Mike Pont and Joey Sykes, and then later Bobby Guy, the keyboard player, and they formed Hotshot. Now, by this time, the great Gildersleeves band Hotshot, which played original music, they had broken up and, fell apart, so the name was available. So Bruno and Steve called this new band Hotshot. They got a booking agent, and they started gigging all around Long Island, Queens, the Bronx, Jersey, Westchester, Connecticut, playing cover songs. They were a top 40 new wave cover band. They played the Cars, they played the Police, they played Duran Duran, and all those one-hit wonder new wave 80s guys like Kajagoogoo, Too Shy Shy, stuff like that. And they were, playing the circuit. And at the time, I was a nightclub DJ. I was working at a big nightclub on Long Island called Speaks. It held about 2,500 people, and I was the DJ. There were no bands. It was a dance club, and I played new wave and, some punk and some electronic dance music and some Motown. It was like a mishmash of stuff, but it was really more new wave driven than anything else. And I was working there. I was also in the daytime working for a record distributor that primarily sold import records. They imported records from Europe and sold them to stores in America, all import stuff that you couldn't get in America at the time. So I was very plugged into all the hottest new music and what was happening as far as what was about to break. Because the cover band scene at the time, going back to that, was very competitive. There were a lot of bands. There was a band called Vixen that played the same kind of music that Hotshot played. So Bruno and Steve and Mike would call me up and go, "Hey man, what's happening? Like, what's the next, song that's going to break? Because we need some new songs to stay, cutting edge and on top. So I would hip them to different things, well, this song's probably going to be big, and, try this one. And they'd try different songs and they'd add some. And that was going on with them. They would call me to get hot new songs to play. And that went on for a while. And then early in the band's formation, Kelly Nichols, who later became the bass player in LA Guns, he becomes the roadie for Hotshot. So the famous story is Kelly was working at a Goodyear tire place, and Steve West lived in Long Island around the corner from the Goodyear tire place, and I think he had a flat or something. He needed his tire fixed, and he went to the Goodyear place, and he sees Kelly there, and he kind of recognizes him because he had seen him at that audition probably a year ago. And he's like, "Hey, man, I kind of know you, I remember you." And they talked a little bit and about the bands they were in, the kids at the time. So this is actually right before Hotshot started, because Steve and Bruno was about to end the kids and start Hotshot. Well, they were going to leave the kids and start Hotshot, or the kids were falling apart and Hotshot was about to start. So, Steve says, "Hey, how you doing over here?" He goes, "This place sucks." He goes, "I don't want to be here." And Steve's like, "Well, would you want to be a roadie? I could hire you for my band as a roadie." And Kelly's like, "Sure, man, anything to get out of changing tires." So Kelly joined Hotshot as a roadie, and that's when I first met Kelly Nichols. 1983, he was a roadie for Hotshot, and we immediately clicked. We had so much fun together. It was a real blast being around him. He was a goofball. We did crazy stuff. He got a lot of girls. He got more girls in the band sometimes, just because he was, another famous story is he was the roadie and the light man. And one night he left the club and went outside with a girl and left all the lights on like full, and they like the board was catching on fire, and he was in the truck with some chick. So we had a lot of fun, man. It was a crazy time. There was a lot of drugs around. Again, I stress this was a different time. It was a different era. It was the early, mid-1980s. It was a less dangerous place. It was a much more innocent time. But we were partying. I mean, Hotshot, some of the guys in Hotshot were selling cocaine. I mean, it was just nuts, And being I was a nightclub DJ, I mean, that's like a first-class ticket to all that, booze, drugs, girls all over the place. And that was a different time, man. I mean, and I tell these stories just to get them down on tape, because it's like a flashback to a time and a place that will never happen again. I mean, my life now is completely different. I'm a completely different person. When I look back on this time, it's almost like it was a different person then, and it was. I mean, I live now in the middle of nowhere because I don't want to be around any of it, because I lived it my whole life. I grew up on a bar stool. So anyway, Hotshot, went on for a while, good couple years, and there was a lot of partying, a lot of fun. We had so much fun. Eventually, the band started falling apart. Bruno and Steve left Hotshot. Bruno eventually played, he was the bass player in Michael Bolton's band in 1985. He did that for a while when Michael Bolton was like a rock guy. Check out the album, Everybody's Crazy. That was a tour that Bruno played on. And then Bruno joined Talus. And by joining Talus, that was the road, believe it or not, to the formation of Danger Danger, which is a whole nother story. But Hotshot were a cover band in Long Island. Bruno Ravel, Steve West, Mike Pont, Kelly Nichols was the roadie. There's so many insane stories of all the antics that went on with those guys and the things that happened in 1983. The drinking age was 18, man. Think about it. No camera phones, no cell phones. It was a much more innocent time. And it was, to me, the last days of like legal, reckless abandon. It was before any crackdown on drunk driving. Look, listen, drunk driving's a bad thing. I've lost people to drunk driving, so I'm not condoning drunk driving, but it didn't exist then. Like, no one cared what went on. You just got away with murder. It was a crazy, crazy time. And, once the drinking age changed, 1985, that was it. all the clubs started closing. No one could survive anymore. It became a different world. All those cover bands, all that stuff started falling apart. And it was the end of that era. But it was a lot of fun at the time, and I'm glad I got to live it, and I'm also glad that I survived it, because I should not be sitting here talking to you guys. I should be gone a few times, and anybody that knows me from those days will know that to be true. But listen, these stories are meant to inspire people to just go for it. You know, it's a different world. You can't live today like it was in the 80s. You can't do it. So don't try to, but be inspired and do your own thing. I really appreciate you guys listening to me. There's going to be a lot more stories coming. Instagram, 1985 Road Dog. And my YouTube channel is Before I, letter I, Forget. And thanks so much. Hope things are well with everybody. Keep on rocking.